take a moment for our land acknowledgement. For those who are new, a land acknowledgement is a way to honor the ancestral lands that we are on here in San Diego, but actually in this country. So it's a way to open up an event and a meeting, and a land acknowledgement is just that, it's an acknowledgement, but you can contact your local museums and your local tribal communities to see how you can learn more about their history and their contributions to our country. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will. Some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life, and some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together today. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. Today, we gather on the ancestral lands that carry the footsteps of the Kumeyaay people. The Kumeyaay people have stewarded this land for centuries, and this land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. Today, the Kumeyaay people are present in 13 bands located on reservations throughout San Diego County. We pay respects to their elders past and present. We find inspiration from this land, the land of the Kumeyaay. Today's session outcomes. This is what we hope to, these are our targets that we hope to hit today. We're going to examine what a restorative school can look like. We're going to connect SEL and restorative practices, and we will review the process of becoming a restorative community.
Today we have an activity for you guys, and we want to envision what a safe, welcoming, caring, culturally responsive school would feel like, sound like, look like. So if we're really doing this, what would you as an adult say? What would you as an adult feel? What would you see around you? What would you feel as a student or as a parent as you look around? So we're going to invite you guys into a breakout room to share the perspective from each stakeholder. As an adult, student, and parent, what would it feel like to have this fully implemented, and share some of our thinking around that. So Melissa's going to break us into breakout rooms, and we'll be there in a second. And we take a little moment to reflect. Oh yeah, be prepared to share out when we come back.
Hi, Christina. I'm going to move you into a breakout room. We're discussing, I'll put the prompt in the chat, but what a safe, caring, culturally responsive school would look, sound, and feel like.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm going to bring back up the screen so we can continue to share.
Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully that was not too abrupt of an ending. I really need to fix that setting for the 15-second return.
We left on who's going to share. But we wanted a little share out, right, Melissa? We'll see if we get some perspectives.
Is there anyone who'd like to share out from what they shared for the adult group? You can unmute or type in the chat if you'd like.
Well, for my group, we heard a couple of different suggestions. Adults would be authentically involved on the school campus. So we would see them volunteering in ways that they would be a part of the school community. You wouldn't be able to tell who's on staff and who's volunteering. And one of my group mates said something really powerful. There would be equity of voice. So parents their voice would be included and respected. And then parents would be able to be risk takers because they're seeing the adults in the school also take risks.
Thank you, Lisa, for sharing. Is there anyone who'd like to share out what they thought a school would feel like, sound like, look like for a student? All right, practicing that, good wait time. Or as a parent, anyone? Bueller?
In our group, we were talking about that both from a student and a parent, that they feel seen and valued, and that folks are learning, that staff learn each other's names for the students as well as the parents, and that it's not just, oh, that's Melissa's mom, but that's, Miss Spaden, or, that they actually have those associations, not just that it's somebody's mom, but learning the names of the parents too.
I love that. It feels like it's something really simple, but it really does have an impact. Really getting to know each other as individuals and not just as the extension of the tiny human that comes to school. We're not tiny in high school. Great. Well, thank you everyone for sharing. I hope that was a good starter for today.
Okay. So what we have here is really a definition of what school-wide social emotional learning is and what restorative practices are. But we really want to highlight how they complement each other and how they build on one another. So I'm not going to go too deep because the rest of the session is we're going to go a little bit deeper in restorative practices, but really looking at the alignment of how the two can create the space for just what we talked about. So for instance, promoting youth voice and striving to achieve equitable outcomes for all students. SEL does that with the 5 core competencies if we're talking about Castle's definition of SEL. And then restorative practices really promotes that youth voice, that equity in voice. When you're doing community building circles in your classroom, you're able to, if you will, level the playing field between the students and the adults to really talk about those competencies or whatever it is in your classroom that you've agreed upon as your expectations, but you're able to do that in a format where everyone's able to, their voice is able to be heard. And I think one of the most important one is that it's building a respectful and welcoming environment for students and adults. And a lot of times when we hear about restorative justice practices, we go right to alternatives to suspension and expulsion, but you really can't start there, because you haven't established a strong relationship. So if you think about it, it's like making a deposit. When you're building that community, when you're building those relationships and nurturing them, when something does happen, you have something to leverage because you've established that relationship. Whole school systematic approaches to formal and informal classroom and school-wide structures and practices. Again, how is our system running? How are we ensuring that SEL and restorative practices are part of our system at the foundational level so that we're not always finding ourselves responding and reacting when we haven't set a system in place. And here we're going to watch a video on community building circles in a school, and then we'll talk about it a little bit afterwards.
Victor, I love your ability to admit that you want to do better at times, and then how committed you are to doing that. Circles are a time for the community to come together and develop themselves as individuals, develop their relationships, and really address community work. And we actually believe that by doing that, kids will succeed more academically because they feel safe and they're in trusting relationships.
Valor is a middle school based in Nashville, Tennessee. We really value our relationships with each other, and we work really hard to create the school community that we want to be a part of. And so Circle is an important part of that work.
Our circle model is something that both our adults and our scholars do every week for an hour. Is there more you need to talk about?
Circle happens in single gender groups of about 20 or so students, led by their mentor teacher.
I think that's really impressive. Circle is done in a structured manner that's very different than the classroom experience that they have at other points during the day. It kind of invites them to be exploring and learning in a different way. Every circle will follow the same basic cadence.
All right, we're gonna start by doing our True North.
It'll always start with what we call a True North practice.
Start by taking one silent, deep breath in, and then slowly letting it out.
It's a mindfulness-based practice for everybody in the circle to let go of the busy day and really focus their attention on each other.
We are going to do a weather check-in. Who would like to start us off?
And then it moves into a check-in.
Today I'm feeling foggy because I'm sleepy.
Everybody has to check in, even if it's minimal.
I feel sunny because it's Friday.
Being able to name their emotions, I think it humanizes everybody involved. It really helps us see each other as people who have feelings.
And then we move into what we call work.
I was a little bit frustrated.
So this is the biggest step of the whole relationship work. You need to let Jaron know that you understand why he felt frustrated, okay? Communities need to work together in order to solve problems, and so people have the opportunity to bring work into Circle.
Examples of work are relationship work with your peers or with your teacher, and we might have people take responsibility for something that had an impact on our community. We also do activities like sharing your life story, reflecting on your values.
Sawyer, are you ready to do your presentation?
The topic I investigated was religion.
Scholars really push themselves and put a lot of effort and thought into the work. You see them starting to become more thoughtful about themselves, more self-aware.
This experience helped me learn that I can be kinder to people with different perspectives.
Then we always end with appreciations.
You always make me laugh.
You always kept trying to get better.
It's a way for the community to appreciate the positive impacts we have on each other.
I like to appreciate you for talking to me over spring break. It's like a mini family. It's a place where you know you're safe. I don't talk about my feelings much, but in Circle I can because I know I can trust them.
I think having the adults do the practice themselves and really know the importance of it is our main strategy.
In through your nose and out through your mouth. Allow your breath to anchor you.
Adults drive this type of work in the community.
Stephen, would you mind kicking us off?
There's some work that I've done with kids in this past week that I need to bring to Circle. In Circle today, I did a process called taking responsibility, which is used for repairing a relationship with the community as a whole. You step into the circle and you own whatever action you took. Like, I recognize that my mistake put you in a really uncomfortable position. I have been at schools where if something were done and not talked about, it kind of festered. Here, and you positively work to rebuild the relationship. Moving forward, I commit to using the systems that are in place and thinking before I act in such a way. I ask kids to do it every day, and I think that's why Valor works, is because everything the kids are asked to do, the adults are expected to do as well.
It helps a lot because they also know what we're going through. Other schools can say you don't understand to your teachers, but we can't say that because they do the same thing as us and they know what we're going through.
Circle is a space that's safe enough that we can share and we can be vulnerable. It also builds relationships that help us become better teachers, help them become better learners.
You guys did a really good job. Appreciate yourselves for that.
Thank you. So this slide here talks about secondary, but just for the sake of the video, I want to make sure that I share with you that circles can be done at the elementary level. And one thing I love about this video, when restorative practices was really starting to emerge in schools, there was this rush to just do restorative practices again, and it was presented in a way that it was only about an alternative to suspension or an expulsion to exclusion. And it really got a bad rap because the message was, we can't exclude anybody, kids get away with everything, and we're just gonna get in a circle and everything's gonna be okay. And that couldn't be any further from the truth. Really, you know, the amount of work that it takes to build this culture, it's intense. But when you stick to that commitment, the dividends pay off like you just would not believe. And again, you can do this with elementary students. I've done it with the youngins, kindergartners. I've taught them how to have conversations in circles. So I guess the message I'm trying to say here is that we're so connected to the curriculum and to the pacing guide and getting ready for testing that we sometimes feel like this doesn't warrant our attention and our time. But when you invest in these types of practices, you're able to get much further in your content because you've developed these safe learning environments where after a while, the students start hurting, or the scholars or students start holding themselves accountable. You're not writing referrals and doing all those things that suck the time out of your teaching time. You're really able to lean on your community. So I just wanted to make sure that I shared that with you. And here, these are just some typical alignments. If you were with us, I believe it was the first section in school-wide or maybe district-wide, we talked about the shiny new initiatives, and it feels like there's so much coming at us, especially now in light of COVID-19. But here you can see how SEL and restorative practices can support the competencies for adults and students. Again, this whole series, we've talked about the importance of the adult doing their work and the young people doing their work so they can see that alignment, how it improves school and classroom climates and strengthens relationships. So we know SEL, we're teaching all those competencies. And then in restorative practices, you're working together in circle, or when there's been a harm, those conversations, but at the same time, you're teaching these very powerful skills. These two, when they're aligned, they affirm culture and identity, and they promote equity. So that value of everyone's voice, that respect of individual talents and interests, but you don't know those unless you're building those relationships using the restorative circle. Then you're elevating youth voice and engagement. In a previous session, again, we talked about authentic youth voice and how can we engage our learners in a way that is meaningful, that they can be seen as leaders and problem solvers. And then lastly, these skills are transferable. They transfer into college or career or just as being a community member as a young adult in our society. So we're teaching them skills and practices that they can take with them as they leave our school system.
And just to add on to what Felicia said, you know, really dispelling that myth of this just being fluff work, right? This is courageous work. It takes strength to be able to do this with adults. It takes courage to be able to do this with adults. So we got to toss that out the window. We got to also look at that it is connected to the academics, because ultimately when SEL and RP work together, we're creating empowerment, right? We can't empower students when we don't feel powerful ourselves. And this is the power that we receive in community and connection to empower students to thrive and bring it all together. This is an activity that we did with our MTSS group here in Sweetwater to start to think about when all of these pieces are in place, when SEL, RP, mental health, wellness, every initiative that's out there is tied together and working, what would our students be able to say on their campus? So we envision this, and this is kind of something we looked at. A student would be able to say that my culture is embraced and welcome as an asset. I have a trusted adult I can turn to on campus if I or a friend are in crisis or considering suicide. I have a trusted adult I can go to if I'm struggling in class. Everyone treats me like their own child with respect and high expectations. I recognize my unique strengths and they're appreciated at school. And we are reimagining discipline, conflict and behavior through a restorative lens. We use SEL and restorative practices for learning and building community. And everyone greets me and shows me kindness, compassion, and respect. And again, this was a collective approach. We came together from a cross-disciplinary team across different departments to break our silos and break the walls and think about how could we achieve this if this is what we would want to hear students saying. And as Felicia mentioned, we can't leave out the adults, right? What would the adults say on the campus as well when all of this is fully functioning? So I invite this also an activity as you do your systems work to ask these questions first with your systemic team and get very clear what is it that you want students and adults to say, because from there we can create the benchmarks. Because if you look at each one of these statements can be measured. Each one of these statements have a tool or a practice associated with it to build it up. And each one can lend itself to refinement and implementation, right? By focusing one at a time. So we might not be there yet, but we could definitely have the tools and practices in place to get there sooner than later. And with that, I wanted to introduce how SEL and RP create an equitable tiered response. Again, thanks to our working group here that we co-created this together to look at what all students need, what some students need, and what few students need, and the indicators that are available at the district, the school, and the classroom level to just kind of show that we're on track. And I share this with you just for you to process, think about, is there indicators at your site that teachers are doing in the classroom to support all students, some and few? Are there some indicators at your school that your school is doing to support all students, some and few? And is the district resources and supports and guidance available to do the same? So Melissa's gonna lead a poll for us. She's gonna pull one up here for us. And we're gonna ask you to reflect on your system and more specifically, the middle tier of your school. And we're gonna think about, do you have these fully in place? Most of these in place, a smidgen of these in place, or none at all? Okay, as we start to see the poll results, we can start to really see the picture that emerges, right? That most of us have a smidgen, with some of us having none or most. And it's just that's where we're at. And I think that's where most of us are at. We're barely understanding and think as a system how these things are interrelated. And the work is here, right? Us communicating and having that clarity so that we can move forward. I'm gonna ask Melissa also and Felicia, maybe to look at the polls and maybe share some insight from what you're seeing as people are responding.
So if folks would be comfortable sharing out in the chat, because I know that unmuting is not the safest space apparently today to do so. What is your main area for growth when you're looking at this sort of response? And maybe it's just restorative practices or something new for your school or your district. Maybe you're starting with SEL and you hope to be able to move into implementing restorative. We'll give folks a moment to share out in the chat. Oh, the poll results didn't share. I didn't realize that. Share results. Sorry, folks. That's what you were saying. Yeah, it looks like you said 78%. The majority are in the smidgen. Thank you. So what we're seeing is whole staff buy-in is an area for growth. A specific curriculum that has worked in the past for others. Developing a system-wide plan to bring it all together instead of things being piecemeal. Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
That's a big one.
Mhm.
Ditto.
Yeah.
I think that place right there, the system-wide plan, is a major focus of ours and a major need across all of our LEAs, because there are so many plans that exist, right? We have our special education plan, we have our LCAP, we have our SIPSAS, and those are just the major accountability plans. You know, we have to look at even your master schedule is in essence a plan that, you know, is a way of looking across and figuring out where is that opportunity for alignment. You know, how are you going to integrate your SEL? Where, if you know you wanted to do something like you saw in the video with restorative circles, where would that be implemented throughout the school day, and especially in sort of school, you know, in a middle or high school where students are changing classes, you know, when would that happen?
And also, I was just going to say the significantly disproportionate plan. You know, you have your students who are accessing services, you know, who qualify for an IEP. All of those have to align. But I like what Natalie said, in time to support staff with it. As school folks, it's okay to give ourselves permission to focus on the staff. This doesn't have to be pushed out to the students right now. It's really important for the adults to get comfortable with it. So when the expectation is that, you know, if you're in elementary school, you start your day with a circle. Or if you're in a high school or secondary school with master schedule, you start second period or advisory, you build an advisory. But you have to find those places where the work can not just, where we can plant the work and then continue to nurture it, because this is a muscle. When we're talking about SEL and restorative practices, this is something that we develop over a period of time with consistent and ongoing practice opportunities.
And before we turn it over, just kind of to think about, and I really like what Natalie put about time to support staff with it. Now, throw a radical idea out there with you, okay? It's radical. We were forced to reimagine the school day as we entered this pandemic distance learning, right? This radical idea of Friday being an asynchronous day, or an asynchronous day, and that being staff systemic transformation time, right? Imagine that. Imagine reflective time built into how our work is and the nature of our work. To be able to look at this, because I know when you guys are looking at the screen and we're thinking, it's a lot of indicators there. You know, it's going to take a while to build. My question I always ask when I'm in a meeting, who and when, right? And we got to support it with our system, because we don't want to be exploitative. We do the work anyways because we know it's good work. But how are we going to support it within our system? So I want to introduce Anthony Sejas joining us today. Wonderful, wonderful restorative practice practitioners. Went to one of your first trainings and amazing work. So I want to be honored to introduce you for today.
That's right. That's right. I actually have to unmute myself. All right. So it's really great to be here. Thank you for having me. Thank you for welcoming me into your space here. And I just love the fact that you all are really looking to see that the connection, the great and natural connection that there is between restorative practices and social emotional learning. And so we said, you know, envisioning a restorative school community, what does that look like? And honoring and valuing each member where they are. So I want you to know that you can always email me. I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can with that. So if we can go to the next slide, please. And so what we say is that we definitely need to be mindful and intentional about our restorative practices, meaning that we all as educators have the responsibility to develop our own form of mindfulness so that we go into the school community very intentional, very strategic, very consistent So we need a consistent practice of mindfulness and self-care so that we can be our best self in service of our students and of our colleagues. Next slide, please. So we say, you know, envisioning a restorative school community. And one of the things that we really encourage is every school community should envision what their school would look like if it was a restorative school, right? And where the social emotional well-being of every school community member, that's the students and staff and parents, and the demonstration of being a caring community is of the highest priority. And I know that's hard for a lot of schools to digest sometimes, that, well, don't, you know, aren't academics our highest priority? No, it's the human beings inside the school community. The human beings inside the school community should always be the highest priority of any school. And of course, we want, you know, high levels of academic achievement and everything like that. But really, the human beings should always be the highest priority. So next, please. And then, so we say, you know, one of the things, if we're a restorative school, we definitely need to have some training, right? Where all school staff are trained and have a clear understanding of what restorative practices are, what they're not, and what is each person's role in building a restorative community. So what's the role even of, for example, the receptionist? And, you know, and if you have a bus driver or a custodian or a noon duty, and all the way to teacher and counselor and school psych and admin, and, you know, everybody should see themselves as part of this and be clear on it, that not foggy, it should be clear. Next, please. And so, and then developing the community agreements, right? That multiple stakeholders are involved in doing this every year, making sure that our community agreements are relevant to who we are, and that if you notice, it says to hold students and school staff accountable, that they're not like this list of rules that we have in the hallway or in the classrooms that are just to hold students accountable. The restorative way is about us being accountable to each other. And unless us adults are in that circle and in that mix, it's not what we think of as a restorative accountability. So, and then additional support is provided to those members, both adults and students, needing additional support to be successful at following those agreements, right? That's what we say. We meet people where they are, and then we provide them the supports that they need to be successful. Next, please. And then, so we really encourage, you know, every restorative school to have like a chance where every student and staff have the opportunity to check in with their community. I personally, I feel like if you're going to be a restorative school, you should have a daily opportunity to check in. And what that does, it's really important because it gives the community a sense of where are you, you know, today, and what's the level of support that I might need to give to you, and the level even of patience and other forms of support. So the community works to embrace all the members, however they're feeling that day, right? If it's on a 1 to 10 scale, if somebody's there at a 1 and they're not feeling well at all, they're welcome, right? And we know we're going to support you throughout the day. We're going to give you that additional care, especially to those who are feeling poorly. But we also celebrate with those who are checking in at an 8, a 9, or a 10, and they're having a great day. We're like, we're happy for you, you know, and yet we're going to call you to service, because we're going to call you to be there for those people who are feeling poorly. Next, please. And then, so we look at it like this. We say that kind of connection between restorative practices and SEL, that all staff should have a really clear understanding how restorative practices and social emotional learning complement each other, and that they are all clear on how social emotional learning is taught through every human interaction, by the way people treat each other. So that people are learning the social emotional safety, the sometimes unfortunately, if they're treated poorly, they're learning that this is not a safe place, that I'm not welcome here, and that I don't feel comfortable being my authentic self. But when they're treated in a way that is very strategic, and you're committed to doing this in every interaction, treating people well and honor them and value them with the dignity that they deserve, they learn this is a place that I feel safe. This is my safe place. I can be my true and authentic self. And it's a place where I truly will learn and achieve academically. So next, please. And then, so we also say that during conflicts, that this is a time that teaching is magnified to a very high level. During conflicts, the young people are really looking at your behavior. How are you acting? Are you going to do like what they're used to seeing is people in power and authority using their power and authority over them, and sometimes demeaning them and devaluing them and telling them this is what you got to do, and then you got to do this, and here's your punishment. And unfortunately, in those cases, the teaching that has been taught is that we're in control, you're our subjects, and this is how things are going to be run. But we say if you use those as opportunities to teach that the restorative lessons, you can do an amazing job of even building and restoring relationships during conflicts. And they can learn new ways of acting with each other when harm is done, and taking responsibility for their actions. Next, please. So we also say that, if you're going to be a restorative school, you want to move towards that point of bringing in parents and provide them explicit and practical information that can be useful to them to actually start utilizing at home. Because then if we are kind of consistent in a sense of what's happening at the school is also happening at home, that is a extremely powerful pedagogy, right? So it's all kind of, fun. And so, but we do understand this, that sometimes what's happening at home, students sometimes are feeling demeaned and devalued at home. They don't feel their voice is important. But at least we know this, when they come to school, we're still going to create an environment where they're honored and valued. And this becomes their safe place, their place where they can heal and truly discover their value. Next, please. Let's see. So, and we say this, that if we want this to be sustainable, it shouldn't just be dependent on one individual at the school. That's why we say develop some kind of a group of committed school staff and students who meet regularly, right, to review and measure how their school is meeting their goal to become a restorative school. So it's really, an important aspect of the restorative school to be able to say, we are going to have a group of people that even if somebody is transferred to another school, we still have a group of people who are going to move this work forward. And so those are kind of the basic components that are needed for a school if they want to call themselves a restorative school and be authentically a restorative school. Those are some of the I would say the key things that have to be in place. So I know we don't have a lot of time, but if there are any questions or comments? And you can probably stop the share now, and I just want to be able to see if I can see people.
We definitely have time for questions if there are any.
And I know that was a lot. And then does SDCOE offer any parent RP training? And I have done some of that myself. I've gone and done that both virtually and in person at different schools. It's not something that I would say is something that we do regularly, but we are going to work at developing a video series for parents so that it'll be accessible to you at any time that you want, and you can, play kind of video sections or whatever is appropriate for you. That's a great question. Thank you. Any other kind of comments or questions or concerns or anything like that? All right. Well,
Hey, Anthony, I have a question. This is Mary Leeds from the Learning Choice Academy.
yes.
In the years you've been doing restorative practices through county, are there any measurements or data available of how it's been successful at the different schools?
What we typically look at, I mean, I know it's kind of probably the general thing that everyone looks at are office referrals for behavior problems, and then suspensions and expulsions. And we try to obviously look to that to be, decreasing, especially if you have a certain population you're really trying to target that for. But we also really encourage people to either utilize their California Healthy Kids Survey, even though it's not done enough and probably, it should. What I try to encourage people is to take out some key questions out of the kind of the school positive climate, those types of questions, and maybe develop your own easier, quick sort of check-in survey, so that you can have students authentically responding, saying, there's somebody on campus I trust and that I feel I can come to. I feel, valued here. My ideas are heard. I feel safe. There are people here support me. Things like that, I think are, if you have a restorative school, definitely those numbers are going to go up.
Thank you. I'd like to see San Diego County schools in that upper 1% with the Valor schools, right? We want to be like that school.
All right, that's awesome. I love that vision, and thank you, Mary, for everything you do. I know you do great work there.
Thank you.
I like what you said, Mary, about all of our schools, because this benefits everyone. It's not about one school or one district or one charter. If we do right by these children and families and our educators, right? If we're taking care of folks in this way, it only benefits us as a society. So I love how you frame that about wanting to see all of our kids in that top 1%. And that's our goal.
Absolutely.
I also love what you said, Anthony, about like meeting people where they are and then giving them the supports that they need in order to succeed. Because I think sometimes there's that fear of taking a risk or, getting involved even in this type of practice. Perhaps there's a resistance from the teachers. But I think as long as we continue to offer ways that people can develop and feel comfortable, from where they're at, I think that's really a key.
Yeah, I think you're right, Loretta. And I also think that goes for our colleagues as well, the teachers and staff, because especially after COVID, they're coming with a lot of different experiences of loss and illness and health challenges and also just anxiety issues and, loneliness, all these things that are happening. And I think as a school community, we have to be committed to saying, we're going to be committed to embracing our colleagues where they are and then providing them the support that they need to be successful as well. So thanks for recognizing that and bringing that up. That's good. I love that. Louise even, Louise mentions that's she's always taught that way, right? from the perspective that everyone can learn from where they are.
Yeah, hi, it's Louise. Yeah, always, no matter how, technically like low functioning the student is, they can always learn from where they are is what I've always thought. And I always try to approach them that way. And usually students do learn when you meet them where they are.
Yeah.
And so that was from an academic perspective, but it seems like the restorative justice is similar, or I was doing something similar to what restorative justice is teaching.
Yeah, and by the way, Louise, by doing that, you are teaching a social emotional, like super important social emotional lesson of embracing kids where they are academically, so they don't feel, oh, I'm dumb, I'm stupid, that kind of things that they may have received those messages in the past. They are receiving from you, hey, I value you, I honor you where you are, and I will provide you the supports that you need to achieve and to succeed. I just think that is an amazing, people can feel safe then with you. They can feel like I get hope. I can learn that I'm not going to feel shame. Those are extremely important lessons. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to just take a minute to reflect on some of our learning from today and over the past 3 weeks or 12 weeks now. Can't believe we actually accomplished this. Felicia and I had this idea and now it actually happened. Luis, do you mind sharing the slides one more time? So we just wanted to have this as a reminder as we close. This is what school-wide SEL looks like, right? These are the indicators of school-wide SEL. And so over the past 3 weeks, we've talked about each of these, and we wanted you to have that holistic picture about how to get there, that it requires that you have a restorative climate in your school with all of those supports, that you need to have that continuum of integrated supports for students and for staff as well. I think we're finally realizing that for our students to be well, our staff need to be well in many ways. So we need to make sure that we're supporting our adults in the system as well. We need to have that really clear focus on both teaching SEL explicitly and also integrating it with academic instruction. So it's not just something that happens once a week through the counselor, school counselor coming in, but it is both led by your school counselor, your site school-based mental health professionals, rolls right off the tongue, as well as all of your teachers, all of the staff at your school. And that adults really know what SEL, what a restorative environment looks like, sounds like, feels like. And then really, like we talked about today, for parents and the community, ensuring that parents and the community have an idea of what this work means, what it sounds like, what it looks like, and how they can support that at home. So we hope that this was helpful for bringing this all back together. So today we talked about what a restorative school can look like, sound like, feel like as well, connected the SEL and restorative practices, and reviewed the process of truly becoming a restorative community. Anthony's email information is here. As always, all of our resources for today will be on our SDCOE SEL site. And if you'd like the specific link for the adult or school-wide SEL, I put that there in the chat. And we're going to give you that